Hello, everybody, and welcome to Let Them Play. I'm your host, Tony Fiorino, and it is Sunday, March 13th. Well, hopefully most of you set your clocks ahead and aren't snoozing through the first part of the show. And, hey, you know, most of the great Northeast is preparing for spring. A big part of that is youth baseball. And as many of you know, I'm a huge baseball guy, so this is pretty much my favorite time of year. But for some, it can be an absolute nightmare. And I guess it's in only the last 10 years or so there's been a development that some think is the end of baseball purity as we know it. Now, I'm speaking, of course, about the dawn of the private baseball instructor. Now, before anybody jumps on the phone and starts to give me garbage about this, just take a pill. I'm very well aware that there are private instructors in a lot of sports. But, hey, it is baseball season, and I want to talk about baseball, and, hey, it's my show, all right? Fact of the matter is this. Any idiot, quite frankly, with some imagination can find some empty warehouse space, put down some good old-fashioned Brady Bunch backyard AstroTurf, and open up a baseball academy or a training facility or whatever else you want to call it. And, in fact, I've noticed quite a bit of this happening here in the Northeast. I believe the issue at hand for us as parents and coaches is this. First, what makes one training guy different than the other schmoes out there? And more importantly, what are some of the intricacies and subtleties around the relationship between the private instructor, the parent, the athlete, and finally the school, travel, or in-town coach? Well, this one's becoming a real hot button. And so this week I've asked personal baseball and softball trainer extraordinaire Dan Gray, the owner and proprietor of Pro Swing Baseball and Softball Training Centers, to join me on the show. Dan and I are going to be discussing some of these issues, and, of course, we'll be taking your calls and questions at 914-693-5700, as well as your emails at heycoachtony@gmail.com. So if you have questions, comments, or even some horror stories about the delicate equation involving the athlete, the instructor, the parent, and the coach, just give us a call and we're going to hash it out. The number again in the studio is 914-693-5700. But without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Dan Gray to the show. Danny, thanks for joining me this week. How you doing, buddy?
No, it's a pleasure to be with you, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Well, for those of you who don't know, aside from battling the one less hour of sleep that we're all dealing with, Danny literally just got off a plane from spring training in Florida last night. So I really, really do appreciate you joining us. But, hey, before we get into some of this stuff with the callers and the whole idea behind this delicate balance between the professional trainer and the school coach, do me a favor and let our listeners know a little bit about yourself, your background in baseball, and maybe a little bit about how and why you started Pro Swing.
Well, this is the 20th year that I've been involved in youth baseball in this aspect of it, as far as running camps, running clinics, doing personal lessons, working with the kids one-on-one or in small groups. And really, the purpose of it was twofold when I started back in the early 90s. It was, one, to stay in the game after my playing days were over, and two, it was to really just try to keep kids interested and passionate about playing the game that I love so much.
Well, in all fairness, I looked at Dan and his first place in Mount Kisco, right at Radio Circle in Mount Kisco. I love it. It reminded me originally of an old-fashioned boxing gym. Closed in. It was just a great old-fashioned, hard-nosed type of school. Since then, and I'm very proud to say, and those of you who listen to the show know that Pro Swing is one of the lead sponsors of this show, and that's for a reason. Danny, based on all his hard work and tremendous success, recently opened up a state-of-the-art facility in Port Chester, which is just absolutely an amazing place. There's a full-size youth infield there. There are just long tunnels for kids to cut loose their arms and throw, pitching and catching training, endless tunnels of hitting. If you haven't checked it out, you got to go to proswingbaseball.com and just take a look at these two facilities. It's absolutely outstanding. During the week, when I kind of gave my listeners the heads up that you were going to be on the show, we got a flood of emails in. And, again, that doesn't mean I'm not going to take your calls, so we've opened up the studio lines at 914-693-5700. But there were a couple of emails that came in that I think identified a couple of key points in this whole equation. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go through a couple of these while we're waiting on getting the phone lines opened here. The first one came in from Sal in Yonkers, who wrote in and said, "Hey, Coach Tony, the problem with this whole scenario is that every character in this setting has their own agenda and their own level of ego. The high school coach and the private instructor are each trying to justify their own existence and, quite frankly, their own salary. The parent only wants what's best for his or her own kid, and the player is usually the victim of any friction in this equation and only wants to become a better player, regardless of whatever sport it is. I want to know how the relationship works between all the various instructors, like in baseball, the summer coach, the school coach, and the private instructor as it pertains to the actual development of the kid. I'd imagine this can get very confusing and frustrating for the kid and the parent. That's a pretty interesting question there. So, Sal, thanks for writing in. Dan, what do you think about this?
Well, as far as the topic's concerned, Tony, I think, Sal's email is basically a microcosm of what the entire issue is. And I think when you and I had prepped about, what we were, how we were going to attack this topic, there were two things I was going to mention. And again, I think Sal hit it right on the head. One is intent by all parties involved. And obviously the intent of the parent and the player should be very simple, to try to be the best player they can be and to try to take this game as far as they can take it. And I tell all my kids at Pro Swing, including your son, that if we can get you into a college program, and baseball helps you do that, is one of the vehicles to do that, to help you get a better education and become a student athlete, then anything that happens after that is basically icing on the cake. But when it gets to what the intent and what really is the purpose behind a high school coach and a summer league coach or an instructor, it's got to be the same intent as what the player and the player has, which is player development. This is not an area, as you know well, where there's going to be a flooding of college coaches at any level, Division I, Division II, Division III, or JUCOs, that are going to come and swarm this area and kind of really try to look at the talent and recruit it heavily. Mm-hmm. So what we have to do as people in the Northeast is we got to make sure our skill set is up. We have to make sure that these kids are learning the right way to play the game. And we have to understand that there's also, yes, there's a mental component and a technique component, but there's a physical component of being faster and being stronger and being quicker and having good agility, that portion of it. So again, to me, it's, to answer Sal's email, it's all about each party involved has to have the right intent within the relationship, and that is what is best for the player, what's best for player development.
Well, let's talk about player development, because one thing you said during the course of answering this email is, we want to teach kids the right way to play. There are times when, listen, let's face it, I'm a baseball guy, you're a baseball guy. In theory, there are 1,000 ways to teach a kid how to hit a ball. So how do you strike that balance between what the private instructor is teaching and what the high school coach is teaching?
Well, the second component to being on the same page and having similar intent is you have to be able to communicate. There has to be communication within the three parties, and there has to be a sense of, and I think Sal said in his email, leaving the ego at the door. Everybody knows their level of baseball. Everybody's comfortable with their level of baseball. But to me, the best way to do it is to always keep the lines of communication open between the player, the coach, the instructor, the summer league coach, and basically, to me, not trying to cookie-cutter approach kids into technique work. What that means is you're not fully breaking down kids from A to Z. You're basically trying to work within what the kid brings you. And so if he's had extensive training with another instructor or a summer league coach or a high school coach or me, basically I'm looking at the kid and I'm trying to help with little changes and subtle changes that are going to try to benefit the kids' success on the field. It's not about completely breaking them down. And what I tell my kids, Tony, and you know this for a long time, dealing with TJ, I never tell my kids there's a right and a wrong way. Mm-hmm. So I don't go to them and say, hey, Coach Fiorino, what he told you is not correct. That's not right. I
want to stop you there, because that's one of the things, if you ever wonder why, I promote and work with Dan and the guys at Pro Swing. That's one of the biggest reasons, because I will tell you, I've been approached by, I don't know if I'm going to say the name of the place, but there's a place near here that is a franchise, and it rhymes with Mosing Dopes. Is that good enough? And the fact is, when they train their trainers, for lack of a better term, they literally have them watch a video. And they just have this robotic approach to, here's what you got to do. And they will literally break a kid down. And that, especially younger kids, it just screws them up. Where Danny and his guys What I love is if you're an inside-out approach hitter or if you're a bottom-to-top hitter, Dan and his guys look at what a kid's been taught, and they kind of use that as the basis to refine it. And I think that's what makes pro swing just head and shoulders above everybody else. I'm losing track of time. We're going to take a quick break. Before we do, though, folks, first of all, remember, Dan and I are going to be taking your calls here at 914-693-5700. But I got to mention this. I talk about Pro Swing being a great sponsor. Listen, ski season is just about over, but there is still some time to take advantage of the terrific rates for next year's season pass at Catamount Family Ski Area up in Hillsdale, New York. Now, I want to take a quick moment to say thank you to Rich Edwards and the good people at Catamount for being such an amazing sponsor and supporter of Let Them Play this past year. But just because ski season's ending doesn't mean you can't still enjoy Catamount. Actually, pretty soon, Rich and his staff are going to be opening up the Catamount Aerial Adventure Park. And this is a fun-filled day of ziplining through the trees and the mountains. My family and I did it last year. It was a blast. So be sure to keep your eyes open for the opening of the Aerial Adventure Park at Catamount. Check in at www.catamountski.com for more information. And make sure you tell them Coach Tony sent you. Stick around, folks. Be right back.